All right. I hope this will work right now. So, okay. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Business Development Consultancy space over here. So, I already remember to record. Then I will directly go into a bit of introduction about me and then also Natalie. So since today is about BD, so I will be hosting the space. So I'm actually Celine, MCVP, MPD, and BD for this term. And then Natalie is actually the MC director for this term as well. So in general, I think if you may see, right, why I have two titles basically for NPD in AIESEC in Malaysia, it stands for National Partnership Development. So it's similar to BD where we are managing national sales. So eventually here is just a bit of my background check. So I was from FL last time, and then back in my LC, I also have experience in IGV for a very short period of time, and I also was IXP for GV before COVID. So for Natalie's side, she was EST for 2 terms under business development, and then she was also LCVP PD IGV. That's how we call BD last time, is a former name. And then she was also from OGV side regarding marketing. So that's just a little bit of background about who is the current PIC that is handling BD right now. And without further ado, so today the content will be actually very straightforward and also very simple. To talk further most is on like why BD. So importantly is to understand the purpose of this function in a bit more detailed manner, and also my towards like my own personal experience handling BD as well. In terms of like why BD is very important, especially right now towards AIESEC in Malaysia. And then further on, we'll talk a little bit about what has BD been like and also the growth path. So if you recall back, I said PD IGV was the former name, right? So in this part, I will also talk why there is a change or a shift in terms of the entire structure of like the LC sales teams and all. Then eventually we'll talk more detail again after the growth path towards this particular current term focus and achievements, and also some non-achievements. And then lastly, based on the experience that we have managed BD for this term, what would be the suggestions that we will be providing to the next term. Then to close off the space, we'll just have a quick Q&A if there's any. So yeah, so coming with that, right, why BD? So I would say why BD is basically to look further on towards the unique contribution of sales in terms of like how B2B partnership is actually contributing to AIESEC as a whole. So I usually like to explain like the unique contribution through our overall AIESEC midterm direction, which is A 2025, in terms of these 3 directions that we are heading into on how BD actually contribute to it. So going one by one each, I would say actually for empowering youth leaders, it basically means when BD are actually bringing partners coming into it, they are also bringing in the support system to build external driven and also relevant youth leaders. So I would say this basically means a lot on how to build like the relevance of our leadership that we preach about in AIESEC towards like the external context. Like take for example corporate context. Is it really what the corporate is looking out for? So a lot of the time is looking into the demand of the outside workplace and how are we actually suited and catering our youth leaders towards that direction so that they can continue to feel empowered to actually learn more about leadership in AIESEC and further on bring forward that leadership values towards the external world. So secondly is about building a long-lasting AIESEC. So this part a lot is on like how partners is also one of like the very important resources that we can utilize or we can have to grow our product more sustainably and also definitely more accessible towards more youth. Oh, okay. Okay. Yeah. So I think that is just basically the idea about building a long-lasting AIESEC, because it is always a fact that the buying power of business to business is definitely much more long-term and much more stable compared to B2C, because as youth, we do not have that much purchasing power to actually continue to cultivate or even build the leadership that we want, as there are also costs that we need to do. So how do we want to build a long-lasting AIESEC and also a long-lasting impact towards the youth is definitely through the support from our partner side, no matter is it strategically or even like financially as well. So lastly is about developing purposeful partnerships. So very straightforward. This one already talked about partnerships, right? So for us, basically, partners is also the enablers that will co-create a lot of the leadership opportunities for youth. Like what I mentioned about empowering youth leaders, they actually help to build external driven and relevant youth leaders through co-creating the opportunities together with AIESEC. And a lot of the times we want to create impact equally for the youth that we want to target. So that is basically very simple and also very like the more towards the big picture part on how BD actually contribute to the entire organization and also to our youth itself. So coming by, I think I will directly go into BD history and growth path. So this part will be a little bit more informative, but I will try my best to actually consolidate from each term to each term. What is the significant thing that actually happened and also the learning. So going by, let's go back to like term 17-18. Back then in 2017 itself, I would say the main learning is coming from we started to establish SLC cells, meaning the foundation is actually built in this term itself, where nationally we actually focus more on like driving national learning partners to support on IGV product packaging itself. So eventually I would say that is the part that actually in term 17-18 sales actually is not mainly focusing on like financial sales, but it's more focusing on like that, for example, crowdfunding, or even like focusing more towards like how we can actually get more diverse revenue to support the IGV product. So eventually like in term 17-18, that is also the part where national sales, especially employer branding initiatives, are at the peak. So it's that's the reason why nationally we actually focus more on employer branding initiative instead of like driving national financial partner for like PDIGV that time. So eventually I would say nationally we focus more on network management because it's the first year that LC start to have PDIGV. So why PDIGV is basically we want sales to directly support on IGV product that time. That's why it's called PDIGV in the past. Yeah, so that is a little bit about like term 17-18 in very short sense. And then directly going into 18-19, this is the part where we have Chevelle and also Gina as the MCEB, PIGV and PDIGV. So in this term, basically the very significant foundation that they have built is on the PDSOP advancement. So back then, 1 year ago, we built up like the foundation where we start to have like locally running cells and all those things. And this is the term that focus a lot on SOP building. So let's say, for example, standardizing the partners management or even like CRM, having hotspot, or even like how to do market research. Like for example, LC should focus more on CSR portfolio and also like SMEs instead of MNCs, because usually MNCs, their expectations will definitely be higher. The budget that they have is also higher, which leads to more suitable towards national partners, etc. So this is basically the term that builds up a lot of like what we are also currently having as a foundation of sales team. And eventually just summarize everything is to have a better structure management for LCs as well. So coming by after SOP advancement, we start to look further more into like continue on LC capacity building. That is still very major focus of us in terms of building the network competency. And then eventually in this year itself is also the year that have half term is going into COVID. So they actually have a lot of like the initiatives that they want to build, but eventually are not able to because GV portfolio for PDIGV is totally different. And when COVID hits, we actually didn't really run like GV or even any of like the virtual volunteer projects for almost like a few months. Yeah. So that time itself, basically a lot of like the national project sales alignment, such as like laptop donation and also the crowdfunding part is actually built up from this term as well. So when we go into COVID, right, that is also the part where we start to focus back on crowdfunding to make sure that our LCs have the cash flow to actually support on the projects, because at that point of time, B2B and also companies also restricted a lot of like their fundings to go into like CSR or even like any of like the other projects that is deemed not that compulsory or mandatory to be done, yeah, because of COVID. So this is the term basically that wish to also implement host family for GV. Host family basically is like we will find families that wish to host international volunteers, and then international volunteers would definitely pay a lower price when it comes to maybe accommodation and food, because host family would actually provide them all of that. So that is basically the idea of like term 1920, where it start to crash with like COVID. So in 2021 is also the term of Mary and Lermin, and this is also the term that we solely focusing on LVV that time. So LVV is local virtual volunteer, and is also a former name of Malaysian Youth Volunteer. So eventually that time we started to realize that LCs are able to gain a lot from crowdfunding, but at the same time it comes with the reputational risk, where when we are collecting money directly from the public, how are we able to really showcase or even publicize the impact of crowdfunding? Because crowdfunding is money, and then to be honest, that time LVV, the impact itself is also very hard to see, or even people will deem it as like virtual projects will need definitely much more minimal cost itself. So I would say that is basically the part where we started to see this risk and we want to mitigate it as much as possible. So crowdfunding is actually shifted the focus towards FP. And this is also the year that started to build up a lot of like the FP kind of like sales competency building to support on IGV product sustainability instead of using crowdfunding itself. So eventually we also start to have more B2B marketing, which we see as a very potential, and also like because of COVID, everything went virtually, right? So we also see the importance of starting to have more digital presence towards, take for example, LinkedIn management and also media partner exploration itself. And lastly, coming by to the last term itself is term 21-22, and this is where EJ was the MCBP IGV back then. So actually for this, we started to change again the entire LC structure from PDIGV towards BD. So what it means basically is a centralized sales force under the local team, where business development team is actually expected to sell all the different kind of partnership portfolio. Take for example, ideally MYV or even AWA portfolio itself, or even in the future GV will be all under BD. So PDIGV previously was only focusing on IGV, but BD will be focusing on all the products and also the LC sustainability itself. So eventually, this is also the year that did very extensive industry research again, and also because it has a major change in terms of the LC structure. So LC sales competency building was refocused back. So eventually, we also start to venture into national CSR portfolio to actually able to secure one national sales itself. So it's also more towards the CSR FP that can be done nationally, and eventually lastly on the PR side of things, where we start to look more into like grants, we start to look more into like public relations, government relations, and all those things from the previous term foundation as well. So this is more towards the upscaling part that we have done. Coming by into this year itself, so I will say actually in term 22-23 is also the year that we started to achieve BD double growth in terms of our BD sales in local level. So we have me and also Natalie that's managing BD in the past winter, and also Ashley, which is the new MC director for IGV that time. So I would say we managed to achieve in winter is each LC to have more than one financial partner to support on, no matter is it EWA project or even the MYB project itself. And we start to slowly see the opportunity to have the shift towards 70-30% business model for all our products. So just an information, 70-30% is actually the new GV financial model that we must adhere to when we start to run back GV as well. So we actually see it as it potentially might also be the future direction of how AIESEC would like to shift the entire business model, where we would get most of our funding from B2B and also just at maximum 30% from our youth itself, because eventually for AIESEC, youth is still our main beneficiary and we wish to achieve more targeted youth. That is the reason why we have this shift up. So eventually, I would say BD network management restructuring is also one of the main focus in terms of how we're going to link all the national touch points to actually build the more effective network management system itself. So what we have managed to focus on is also towards these few things. Okay, so I think later on I will talk more about especially what happened in this term as well. So eventually we also start to focus more towards like as it goes into BD and we start to see the performing curve and trend. So we start to have more LC to LC or MC to MC cross-selling model or even upscaling model that is able to be done with more partners as well. So eventually, I think that would be generally the entire evolution of BD from term 17-18 until this term, which is 22-23 half term. So going a bit more detail about what has happened in this particular term, especially in the past almost like almost 8 months itself, is actually on this. So I will be talking a little bit also in the past winter, what has been the particular strategies that nationally we have been pushing. So just a little bit of side note, in winter, we actually I was actually the ones that managing BD, and then that is the reason why this strategy actually involved all the national and also local sales team strategy itself, because it's actually a merge focus. So for this part, basically the first strategy is about AIESEC Love Partnership. So this part is a lot about like portfolio upscaling and innovation on how we actually able to cater to youth and also partners needs itself. So that's the part where we want our sales force to have strong understanding towards our product and people's worth, and also with that able to reflect on the portfolio customization itself with the MOS of the B2B revenue percentage. So eventually with the tactic wise, a lot of the things is actually partially focusing on like network management, such as sales summit and functional visits, and also towards the BD cluster management, where we start to have group coaching at a more systematic manner as well. So the cluster management, the thought process is actually done through tiering, where we evaluate and analyze all the LCs performance of sales, and then also their competency and also their focus portfolios, to actually group them up together and really look into what is the particular focuses that each of the BD coaches can actually work on with the different clusters. So eventually we also start to look more into like how our proposal can be more concise and also updated towards like the respective information itself. So we also have proposal refreshment in terms of the template, and then lastly is on the national sales portfolio attraction part. So eventually for the 5-star deliverables management, this part is also with the strong belief that our partnership can only sustain when we actually manage them quality instead of quantity. So partnership deliverables management is still one of like the main focus that we have to make sure we are at the same time able to upscale to have larger and more high impact partnership deliverables. At the same time, we have a very clearly defined resources for the respective partners to make sure that all the deliverables can be 100% met. So eventually the MOS here is on NPS score 9.5, where we would be using this as the main measurement to look into the customer satisfaction, which is our partners, on whether are they actually potentially looking towards like future collaboration or not. So that is how we're going to define having a good deliverables management with partners. So eventually we look a lot into like further on how we want to add on the services or the values to our partners, such as customizing the deliverables, and then also co-selling model to create larger impact, not only from LC side, but also MC side, and also partner appreciation, where we start to have more consistent engagement with them. Going into physical, we start to have like the appreciation by physical meetup, or even like allowing them to actually join our physical events, etc. So lastly, I think coming by is AM55 leadership campaign. So as everyone knows over here, this year is actually the 55th year for AIESEC in Malaysia. So back then in winter, I was trying to also create a campaign more towards B2B to showcase the youth leadership and also the partnership impact through this campaign. So a bit of side note over here is unfortunately because of like manpower capacity issue, where we have lacking of ESTs, and then from my side also managing BD and MPD at the same time. This focus is actually halfway a little bit stopped because of like the capacity wise. So eventually I would say this leadership campaign main focus is on the youth consultancy report for 2023 itself. In the past, we actually have the first version back then in 2021. So we are trying to have a refreshed version of that. And then eventually we want AIESEC to be recognized as a credible leadership development platform. Yeah. So eventually what we wanted to do is actually on like AM55 brand localization, membership showcasing and partnership showcasing, and then also at the same time release youth consultancy report. However, I would say the main thing that we have managed to done is on membership showcasing and also partnership showcasing part, where AM55 brand localization is not much of a focus, as I do not have any B2B marketing manager at that point of time. And then youth consultancy report as well, where we actually stuck at the part of like data analysis part and didn't manage to complete it. So that is basically overall like what is the things that have been done in the past winter. And also with the achievements over here, this is basically for BD side, where this is more towards like the entire LC term of 2023, we actually managed to hit about 116K of LC sales won, and also 39 partnerships formed with 3K outreach to leads. So I would say eventually this is towards like the entire term from past February 2022 to January 2023 itself for the entire LC term. However, I would say mainly for the winter achievement itself, based on how we mainly calculate, is more towards the sales operation efficiency refinement. So we start to have more on the local sales team coaching and also the sales proposal refreshment. We've able to see a very significant growth in terms of local and local and national B2B revenue. So I would say the growth itself is comparing this winter, I mean like the past winter and the past summer, of like the local B2B revenue. And then eventually for sales funnel also the same. We compared between the two peaks itself. So I would say in the past itself, the summer of 2022, we actually focus a lot on targeting the top funnel itself, mainly on like how to generate more leads, how to contact more leads and all those things. So that is the part on the reason why there is a drop in terms of the top funnel, mainly because in winter, actually a lot of the partnerships are being re-raised, or is actually already a very potential warm lead coming from summer term. So that is why you can see there is an increment of conversion of sales funnels from the bottom funnel, especially meetings to MOS side instead of the top funnel, because most of the efforts are being placed on converting towards sales one. Yeah. So I think that is also shown that actually for partnership, we start to also see like with the increase of sales won, actually the process time or even the consideration time from partner side also potentially will increase as well. That is also the reason why most of the summer leads are only able to be closed in winter leads. So that is a bit of like the learnings of the winter achievement and non-achievement. So lastly, coming by is also on this particular summer focuses. The first focus is on sustainable partnership management. So I will say overall is to drive 30% growth overall in the entire AIESEC in Malaysia sales force, including national and local side, by upscaling the current sales portfolio framework and pricing. So we'll be targeting 30% of the partnership growth for BD and also MPD. In terms of sales one, and then also partners retention will be our main focus also in this summer. So we start to look more into strategic partners and also national portfolio refreshment itself to drive more growth nationally, and then eventually start to also look into how to consciously drive partnership growth path management both nationally and locally through upscaling, co-selling, and also cross-selling sales strategy. So eventually we also have the local ready-made proposal framework for LCs to actually directly utilize to cut short on the preparation time of their proposal making and drafting period, to make sure they are able to directly go into attraction and leads contacting as soon as possible in summer. So eventually, I think AM credibility management would be also a bring forward focus from the AM55 campaign. So it's basically to create a visible AIESEC brand through leadership value content showcasing and also partnership showcasing in terms of the partners that we have nationally. So we will still focus on NPS because that is eventually how we are able to drive quality partnership, at the same time able to showcase quality partnership impact. So eventually after credibility, this one is more towards BD as well, AM sales superheroes. So we would be integrating problem-based L&D during sales mastering process, especially when we are building the competencies of local sales team, as they are very, very new in summer. And in order to build empowering sales team and also to strive for the 300K sales one itself, we are actually looking into more on the integration of the overall network management on how are we managing the entire commission itself, and then driving more practical experience that they can directly utilize to work on during the sales mastering process. Yeah, let me drink a bit water. Yeah, so I think generally that will be overall for summer focuses itself, and then eventually just a bit more detail about AM sales superheroes is with these few timeline that we have managed to map out. So eventually for network management, right, just to take note, commission call is done by weekly basis, and then LCP O2O is also done in almost a bi-monthly basis. So basically our main focuses as national BD team right now, we are focusing on these few things. First one is on BD tiering plus group coaching. So the thought process of group coaching actually comes from the preparation of BD tiering first, where as usual we will tier up the LCs based on their performance and then allocate particular BD coach to actually coach them specifically on their main pain when it comes to partnership engagement during the group coaching session. So KPI basically will be on the number of sales won, and then also on how many FP we are able to raise and form. So I would say why we are actually doing this is basically to have more consistent BD performance checkpoint. Because usually for commission call is a lot about downscaling information. So group coaching would actually be a more straightforward touch point where LCVPs are able to reach out to ESTs or even MC to actually understand how effective are they actually doing, or are they actually doing enough. So at the same time, customize support towards the targeted group of LCs and SUs based on their pain point, and then closer monitoring on the BD bi-weekly progress, especially in terms of like their lead KPI. Take for example, how is their funnel, how is their conversion rate bi-weekly basis, to make sure that their momentum is there. So another part that we are also currently equally focusing on is BD steering team and OCR management. So we also launched BD steering team for the current batch of LCVPs, where we are actually looking more towards them to actually drive effective OCER management that is under IGV and AWA project team. So why so is actually because in the past we actually did see the potential red flags where when our project audit is not passed, is sometimes due to unable to secure the learning partner, school partner, and also financial partner for the particular project itself. So coming by with that, we actually want to target on OCR management to actually drive the BD accountability towards our IGV and AWA project. And then at the same time, it will be served as an active pipeline nurturing to allow OCR members to actually go up to BD when they apply for MT or even EB. So coming by that is on the steering team and OCR management, which is currently on track. Lastly is on the BD functional visit and also sales summit. So sales summit was actually done in the past weekend, and then together at the same time, we will actually kickstart BD functional visit to actually audit and tackle on the effectiveness of how LCs is working on their sales operation. So take for example, we would actually join in to observe how they do partnership meeting, how they do synergy meeting, and also on the spot, give them some comments and suggestions on how can they do it better. So the main KPI is actually to improve on the conversion of leads to first meeting during April, and then eventually we'll look into the first meeting towards MOA sign conversion as a KPI as well. So eventually that is basically how we are also going to audit on the effectiveness of sales summit during the functional visit itself. So eventually that will be a lot more detail about how we are currently working on the network management plan instead of like maybe per touch point basis and only focusing on L&D. So I think that is just generally a little bit of what currently have been done in this current term. And then here is just a bit of context about the current national team that we have. So right now, I'm more focusing on managing NPD, which is the national sales side, while Natalie will be more focusing on handling BD. So eventually under Natalie, we have two BD coach, which is the EST that will be managing on group coaching and also steering team. And then for my end, I will actually be focusing more on national new sales and then also the current national partner deliverables management side. So that will be a bit about the current national team of NPD and BD and also the structure itself. So yeah, I think just to kind of like go on everything as well. So with that, I will propose direction and also suggested focuses for BD in the upcoming 1 year or the new term will be on this field. So first one is to expand BD HR structure. So understand that comparatively right now, we're actually able to see growth in terms of BD revenue or even B2B revenue. That is why to actually put more resources, especially manpower towards BD, local sales team and also national sales team equally is super very important because eventually there should be manpower focus towards BD team to actually drive more sales in order to support the 70-30 model or even more project growth. And eventually in the long run, hopefully we're able to drive more EBMT layer only in BD sales function to make sure actually the manpower are the quality talents that would be recruited into BD only. So this is to make sure that all the BD members are actually able to really understand the project first before selling them to partners. So eventually, we will also suggest all the OCER management to be parked under BD in the future as well to actually coach and also provide L&D. So that will be more on the BD HR structure and also the thought process. Second one is on national BD initiative, where right now I would say actually LC side, we are starting to have more partners. So it would be great if national side we are able to start to run national BD initiative that can be also an add-on value to encourage LCs to close long-term partnerships or even more add-on values for the partners as well. So take for example, it can be like a national networking event between partners and also AIESEC, etc. So eventually, I think the third point is on BD partnership upscaling. So I would say this is still very important because right now we actually cannot really promise on the 70 and 30% model, financial model for our product yet, because it would take some time to actually do have that shift of the change management. But eventually, I would say mainly it's also because LCs right now is still not very stable in terms of partnership management. So I actually would suggest more on how we can branch out our focuses towards upscaling grant and award application to bring out more credibility as a youth organization, and also have more partners to trust us as a new youth organization. At the same time, government relation. So take for example, to have government to really advocate for any of the AIESEC activities that promotes youth leadership movement and all those things. And lastly, public or media relations to continue on the BD credibility itself. So eventually, I would say lastly is on overallly how national team should always keep in mind is on the national sales team pipeline nurturing. So eventually, I think this is correlated to how we can expand BD HR structure locally in the local sales team, and eventually how can we actually set a very clear growth path for local sales team to go on to national sales team to actually continue to build up their competency as salesperson. So that is basically overall the proposed direction when it comes to the HR, the portfolio, and also like the events that we are able to work on for BD in the upcoming one term. So eventually, I think these are just some of like, I would say the BD key learning that we are able to get in organizational, functional, and personal perspective. But I don't think I would go into detail because most of them are actually quite self-explanatory as well. Take for example, organizational definitely really understand how corporates see the value of AIESEC and also AIESEC in Malaysia. And then eventually functional part to learn more about B2B partnership, how to do sales. And then personal is definitely also on like the coaching skills when we are managing the commission, and also more data driven when it comes to analyzing the sales performance in the local sales team. So that is basically the rough key learnings that we are able to get definitely as national BD. And yeah, I think basically that would be all for the space itself. So I think we'll just go on with a Q&A space if there's any question. So I think I can also send the what you call the question sheet over here. Yeah. Cool. So yeah, I think can just digest a little bit, and then if there's any questions can let me know, then if no, can also give me a wave. Okay, can. So I think if there's no question, Eugene, if like you have any question, you can also directly approach me and Natalie also lah. So if there's no more question, then I think I will go back to a very quick round of like sharing of resources as well. So eventually, I think yeah, definitely, I think Eugene, you already have our contact as well. Then this is also for the rest that are interested in national sales to contact us directly through Telegram, as we'll be very active over there. And then also we have our AIESEC email over there as well. So looking forward for that. And then eventually here are just some of the resources that might be helpful for you to understand BD a little bit better. So BD National folder basically is all the folder that you are able to get in terms of how LC management are being done, or whether there is any like national BD portfolio and all those things. So it's all in here. And it should be BD growth path for 2015 to 2024. So you can actually take a look over there as well. And then eventually BD LC tracker will be more on how we actually track LC performance through HubSpot, and also on all the sales funnel data is all there as well. So eventually that will be just a bit of the resources. So good luck for those that will be applying for MC and then looking forward for your application. Yeah, that's all from BD Consultancy Space. Bye.